Hi everyone, my name is Ebony and welcome back to my channel.
Think I know you better to forget her. Certain people made for running. Think I need you more than let you know I'm bored and tell me this means more than nothing.
So today I am going to be doing a Christmas book haul. I call it a Christmas book haul, but I didn't get the majority of these books for Christmas. I actually think I only got one book for Christmas, but it kind of works because Christmas just happened and a lot of these books were Christmas gifts to myself. So I'm just gonna go with it. We have a lot of books to talk about here, so we're just gonna get right into them. So the first book I have here is Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab. I've talked about this book and this series a lot lately. So this is the second book in the Cassidy Blake series. I'm going to talk about the first book just to avoid spoilers. So this is a middle grade series that follows a girl named Cassidy who can see ghosts, and her best friend is also a ghost. However, her parents are the authors of this very popular ghost hunting book series, and they end up getting a TV deal so they can do a TV show based on their book series. And so for the TV show, they go to all these different haunted places in the world and film their TV show trying to hunt ghosts. But they don't know that their daughter can see ghosts, so they keep going to all these places, and Cassidy just keeps getting into all these different messes because she can see the ghosts that they're like hunting for. I have read this one already, and I just love this series so much because they're middle grade. They're such quick pace, easy reads, lots of action, lots of things happening. They're really easy to get through, and I just really enjoy them. And I'm also really excited for the third book to come out in March, so I'm so pumped. I love this series. And also I forgot to mention that I'm going to be organizing this video by the places I bought my books. So this book and the next book I'm talking about I got from a local bookstore called The Bookworm. And the next book I have is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds. So this is a novel written in verse that follows this character as he's going down an elevator. And he's trying to decide whether or not to kill the person who killed his brother. And so as he's going down, the ghosts of his past kind of get onto the elevator, and they like tell him like, hey, you haven't thought about this, and you should really consider what you're doing before you go and do it. And they really help him to make his decision if he's going to kill the person that he thinks killed his brother or not. This is a very sad and heart-wrenching story. And I also think that even though it's written in verse, it's also just like really beautifully written. I did read this for my 24-hour readathon that I did on Christmas Eve, which you can check out up above, and I kind of went into more detail on my thoughts on it. I just really loved that it's written in verse, and I took a poetry class last semester, so my poetry brain was like kind of analyzing it as I was reading, and so I did talk about that in my vlog if you want to check that out. But yeah, I did really enjoy this one, and there is a graphic novel version of this story, and I would like to pick that one up sometime soon. Okay, the next book I got is from Barnes & Noble, and that is Fangirl, the manga by Rainbow Rowell, adapted by Sam Maggs and illustrated by Gabby Nam. This is a manga version of the very popular story Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I'm sure many of you have heard of that story. I'm just so excited that they're doing these manga adaptations because I love Fangirl. It's one of my favorite books, and I'm just like really pumped to be reading it in a different medium because like last year I read Fangirl 3 times. Like, I'm obsessed with Fangirl. Like, I love that book. And so like reading it in a new medium has been such a blast. I have already read this graphic novel. I read it in the same readathon that I read Long Way Down, and it was such a fun time. This is volume 1, and I believe there are going to be 4 volumes. It was just, it was amazing. I really liked that the way that this graphic novel is adapted, it kind of cuts out the little scenes in between chapters that talk about Simon and Baz. Because Fangirl, like, obviously focuses on Kath's fanfiction and her fanfiction on Simon Snow. And so, like, in between the chapters, it has, like, snippets from her fanfiction or from the actual Simon Snow books. And in the graphic novel, they sort of cut that out. There'd be, like, 1 or 2 pages that sort of just showed who the characters were that Kath was writing about, but there really wasn't much in the way of a story for them. And I honestly liked that because in Fangirl, that's probably my least favorite part of that book is the little snippets of Simon and Baz, because I'm not a big fantasy person. I'm much more contemporary, and so I like Kath's story more than I like Simon and Baz's story. And so I really liked that they made that change for the graphic novel. However, one thing I didn't like about the graphic novel is that it sort of, some of the scenes just don't play quite right in the graphic novel version than they did in the actual book, just because it's a graphic novel. And so like that was kind of a downside. But I did love seeing Levi drawn out because he is a beautiful little boy, and I just love him so much. Next 5 books, I believe, I got from Half Price Books, which is one of my favorite places to shop. First one is The Golden Lily by Rochelle Mead. This is the second book in the Bloodlines series. If you didn't know, Bloodlines is a spin-off series to Vampire Academy. And I honestly don't know much about Bloodlines, and I don't want to know what this one is about because I haven't read the first Bloodlines book and I don't want to be spoiled. But basically, I guess if you like Vampire Academy, you should probably read Bloodlines. I haven't read Bloodlines yet, but I'm really, really pumped to read them. And so, if you didn't know, I'm also co-hosting a Vampire Academy and Bloodlines read-along with a bunch of lovely friends from BookTube, and actually, we're about to film our live show for Frostbite in like 40 minutes as of when I'm filming this video, and so if you haven't seen that, you should check it out, and also join our read-along. It is so much fun. We have a blast discussing the books, and so when you're watching this, the next live show will be over Shadowkiss. I don't know when it'll be, but I will have that information in the description box, so just like if you're interested, just check out the information down below. I love Vampire Academy, love Bloodlines, glad I have this book. I still am missing books 1, 3, and 4, so eventually I will have to get them. I haven't like prioritized it because it's a while before I have to read Bloodlines, but eventually I will have all of the books because we have to read them. Next, I have Girl in Pieces by Kathleen Glasgow. So I bought this book back in October, I think, and I believe I started it the same day that I bought it, but I didn't like continue it that much. I think I read like a third of it, and then I kind of put it down, but then I finished it during that 24-hour readathon that I keep talking about. But I picked this one out hoping that it would be a sad contemporary that would make me cry, because I love crying at sad contemporaries. It didn't make me cry, but it was still really, really good. So it follows this girl who is in a mental hospital, and she's struggling with PTSD and things that happened in her past. She's also really shy, and she doesn't speak really at all while she's in the mental hospital just from her PTSD. And eventually she ends up leaving the mental health facility and going to stay with one of her friends, which is where the book kind of took an interesting turn in a place that I wasn't expecting. I'd say the second half of the book was really just, I never knew what to expect from one moment to the next. I was like, what is happening? This is not what I expected when I picked up this book, because I figured this book would be about mental health, and it is about mental health. Like, it's one of the main things this book focuses on, but it just didn't go in the place that I thought it was going to. But it was still really good. And also, trigger warning on this book for suicide, self-harm, just mental health issues in general. I didn't like research all of the trigger warnings beforehand, but like just know that this is a very triggering topic, so just be aware before you go into it. Next, I have Always Never Yours by Emily Wibberley and Austin Siegeman Broca. So this is a contemporary that follows a girl named Megan who's always the girl that people date before they find their one person, like their one true love. And she's come to terms with that, but she's kind of honestly over it. And she also has dreams of becoming a director, but in order to get into school to be a director, she has to have acting on her resume. So she decides to join her school play, which is Romeo and Juliet, and she tries out for the smallest part, which is Lady Montague, because she's a little nervous and she doesn't want to be on stage. But the casting director throws them all for a loop and actually casts her as the main role, Juliet. So I've also heard that this book is sort of like a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but the main character, Megan, is Rosalind instead of being Juliet. I don't really know how that all works. I've just heard that from people. So I'm excited to see how that plays out in this story. And also I wanted to mention that apparently the authors are a couple, and they met during high school when their school was putting on a Shakespearean play. And so like this book is sort of like based on the romance, and I think that's just so adorable. And I'm really excited to get to this one because I love me a good fluffy contemporary. Next, I have Suicide Notes from Beautiful Girls by Lynn Weingarten. This is another book I picked up because I was hoping it'd be a book that would make me cry. I haven't read it yet, so I don't know whether or not it will make me cry. So from what I gather, this story is about a girl named Delia who burns to death in her stepfather's shed, and everybody thinks it's a suicide. But her best friend June doesn't believe that it's a suicide, and she believes that her best friend was murdered. So from what it sounds like, this is a murder mystery, and I'm really pumped for that because I've been reading a lot of murder mysteries lately, and I've been just like so into them. So it honestly like draws me towards it more because of that aspect. So this might be one that I pick up soon. And the last book that I got from Half Price Books is 5 Feet Apart by Rachel Lippincott with Mickey Daughtry and Tobias Iconis. This is a very hyped up book, and there was a movie that came out in 2019, I believed, based on this book that did really well. It had Cole Sprouse in it, and people were really obsessed with it. And I have read this book before. I read it on audio the first time, and I read it in a day. I completely devoured it. It was so good. I really enjoyed it. But if you don't know, this is a story that follows two characters who have cystic fibrosis, and they can't get within 6 feet of each other because their bacteria could make the other person sick and potentially die. So this disease is very serious and it has a very high fatality rate. It's a very serious issue for these characters. But of course, they end up having a romance, and so it becomes an issue that they have to be 6 feet apart. And honestly, this book is very relatable right now. But I just really enjoyed this book. It is so beautiful. It was one of my favorites. I love the cover. The cover is gorgeous. I've been looking for this book for so long, and every time I find it, it's always the movie cover, and I wanted this cover because it is so beautiful. Just like, look at it. It's like the prettiest thing I've ever seen. I really enjoyed this book. I enjoyed the movie. Just overall, it was a really good but also sad story, and it was great. Okay, the next few books I got from secondhand stores, and so the first one is the first Michael Vey book, which is The Prisoner of Cell 25 by Richard Paul Evans. Okay, for some reason the lighting is turning really yellow, and I think it's because of the book. I honestly think it's because, yeah, like, look, now it got normal. I think the book is like throwing off the white balance or something. I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll just try to get through this quick because this lighting is atrocious. Basically, this is a book series that follows these characters who are electric and they have electric powers. Main character's name is Michael and he can shock people. He also has a best friend named Austin who's not electric, but he's really, really, really smart. And then he meets another girl who's also electric whose name is Taylor, and she can read people's minds and also reboot people. So there's like a whole bunch of electric kids, and so then there's a guy who like was there when these electric kids were created, and he knows how it all happened, and he's also kind of evil, and so he kidnaps Michael's mother, and so Michael and his friends have to go to this school in California where he thinks his mother is being held hostage and just battle the electric kids. It's a wild time. Honestly, it's really hard to explain this book series, but there are 7 books in the series, and they're all just so good. And also, it has been announced that there are going to be 3 more books in this series, so I am so pumped for the new books because I just really enjoy this series. Also, I wanted to let you know this is a like urban fantasy series, and I would say that the first couple books are more middle grade, but I think that it sort of ages up as you read through the series. So there's something else to look for as well if you want to read this series. Okay, the next book I have is The Selection by Kiera Cass. See, now the lighting isn't bad. I don't understand. That was weird. I'm sure many of you know what this book series is. It's sort of a bachelorette style dystopian fantasy book. Honestly, just like everybody raves about it, and so I wanted to know what all the hype was about. I wanted to know what I was missing out on in 2012 when I decided not to read this series. I don't know what I was doing. So I actually read this book as part of my December Fantasy Challenge, which you can check out the vlog up above, and I really enjoyed it. It was really just like captivating, and I was really like into the romance. I was into the whole like selection thing that was going on. It was very good. I really enjoyed it, and I cannot wait to continue this series. And the last book I got from a secondhand store is Commonwealth by Ann Patchett. Also, look at these deckled edges. Aren't they gorgeous? I bought this book because Ann Patchett is the author of one of my favorite memoirs, Truth and Beauty, which I've talked about a little bit on my channel. So this is a story that follows Franny Keating, whose family is kind of a mess, and at her christening, I don't know what that is, party, this guy shows up uninvited and kisses her mother. They sort of like start dating, I guess, and so they bring their families together, and things just get kind of crazy within her family. And then when Franny is in her 20s, she tells her story to a very famous author, and that author uses her story as the baseline for his new book, which ends up being wildly successful. From what I understand, this book also spans over 5 decades, so if you're interested in the types of books that follow multiple generations or just like over a long time period, this will be one for you to check out. I haven't read this one yet. I'm really excited to see how Ann Patchett does in other genres because I have read her memoir, but I haven't read anything that's fiction from her. So I'm just really pumped to see what she can do in a different genre. Okay, so the next book I got from Thrift Books, and that is Never Said by Carol Lynch Williams. This is the author of one of my favorite books ever, which is Waiting. My roommate actually told me about this book, and then I found out that it was written by the same author as Waiting, and I was like, I have to buy this book right now. And I also did talk about this book in my 21 books to read in 2021 video, which you can check out. But essentially, this book follows a girl named Sarah whose family and her life has always revolved around her sister Annie. But then Annie sort of has a change of character. She chops her hair off, quits her beauty pageant stuff and gains a little bit of weight, and so like the family is now still focused on Annie, but for all the wrong reasons, according to Sarah. And so Sarah knows that something's going on with Annie, but she doesn't really want to confront her about it. But eventually the two girls finally start to talk to each other and the walls break down. I honestly don't really know what to expect from this story. It sounds really interesting and unique, but I am just really excited to get to it because I'm just really excited to see what Carol Lynch Williams can do in other stories and if I will like it as much as I like waiting. The next several books I had to buy for my classes. The first two are actual like novels, but then the rest of them aren't as much. So I'll talk about the first two more, but then the rest of them I'll just briefly mention. First one is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. I'm really excited that we were required to read this one for one of my classes because I've heard good things about this on BookTube. However, I am a little nervous because from what I gather, this book is about a flu pandemic, and so I'm a little concerned about reading that during a pandemic because I use reading as escapism, so I don't know if I really want to read about the things that I'm currently living through. But I have to, so we'll see how that goes. But from what I gather, this follows a Shakespearean theater group who like travel around what's left of the world. And I've also heard that it takes place in 2 separate timelines. I don't really know too much else about it. I'm a little nervous going into it, but I will be reading it sometime soon for my class. The other book I have to read is Terrarium by Scott Russell Sanders, and I don't know much about this one either. From what I gather, it's sort of about a futuristic dystopian society that abandons Earth. They go to a place called Enclosure, which is like a network of cities. Honestly, it sounds very like alien-esque. I don't know if there's space travel in it, but there might be, and I think it's very tech-savvy-ish. Like, it's kind of like a sci-fi maybe, because the class that I have to read this for, Technical Communication, does focus a lot on the technical side of writing, and so I think that there might be a lot of technology-based things that happen in this book that we will be applying in the classroom, so I'm kind of nervous about that because I'm not sure how interested I am in that, but we'll see how it goes. It could go both ways. I don't know. The next couple books I will just briefly mention. So I have In the Palm of Your Hand. This is a poetry portable workshop. I took poetry last semester, so this is probably just gonna be like a refresher for me on how poetry works and things you can do with poetry. I also have 2 poetry collections for that same class. I have Travesty Generator by Lillian Yvonne Bertram, and then I have The New Nudity by Hadara Bar Nadav. So both of these authors, and actually the author of another book that I have to read for this class, are doing readings on my campus, so I'm really excited to like read their book and also hear them read their work aloud as well, so I think that's going to be really interesting. The other book I have for that class is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay. I'm pretty sure this is a book of short essays. I'm not really sure exactly what the essays are about, so I'm excited to see what this is about. Honestly, they look really short and like it's almost written in verse, and honestly, I just really love how short this book is. It's like so cute. And then the last book I have for class is Smoke and Mirrors by Neil Gaiman. This is a set of short stories by the very famous author Neil Gaiman, and I'm really excited to read this one because I've heard good things about Neil Gaiman's writing, but I've never read anything. So this is a good starter to read Neil Gaiman's stuff. Speaking of Neil Gaiman, I have another book by him. This one was bought by my friend Faith for me, and she gave it to me for Christmas, and that book is The Graveyard Book. This is the graphic novel version of The Graveyard Book, and I actually found out that this is volume 2, so I'm gonna have to buy the first volume before I can read this one, but I'm still super pumped to have it and to read it. It's still in like the plastic packaging that we bought it in because the packaging to me is like so satisfying, and I don't want to take it out of the packaging because like I don't know, it's like just the way it feels is really satisfying, and like I don't know how to explain it. I just really like it, so I haven't taken it out of the packaging yet. From what I gather, this book follows a character named Nobody Owens who goes by Bod or Bode. I'm not quite sure how to say his name, and he lives in a graveyard and is being raised by ghosts. And so there's also like a menace character named Sleer. There is an opening to a desert and a city full of ghouls, and there's a best friend who's also a witch. I don't know, it sounds very Halloween-y, very spooky, atmospheric, and I'm just really excited to read this graphic novel because I've been loving me some graphic novels lately. And yeah, I'm just really excited about it, and I'm very thankful to my friend Faith who bought it for me. Almost done. The last 2 books I have on this list I bought from my roommate. She had to buy them for a class she took last semester, and she was gonna sell them, so I was like, I will buy them from you because I want them. The first book I have is Shout by Laurie Halse Anderson. This is a memoir of Laurie Halse Anderson's life. It is honestly very tragic. There's some very sad things that happened to her in her past, and honestly a lot of it is her inspiration for her books, especially Speak. If you've read that book, you know the sort of triggering things that happen in that book, and so this book sort of talks about how the things in her life inspired her to write Speak. And I have read this one before. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Laurie Halse Anderson herself, and I really enjoyed it. It was very wonderful. I believe it is written in verse, or it's read like it's written in verse, and so I'm really excited to read it physically and also like see how it reads physically and like being able to see the words on the page instead of just listening. Super pumped either way. Really enjoy Laurie Halse Anderson. She's the author of my favorite book, Winter Girls. I just love her so much, so I love having another book by her. And the last book on this list is Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is a graphic novel story about 2 characters who work at a pumpkin patch. And it's their last night working at a pumpkin patch that they've worked at for I think 4 years. And honestly, it's just super cute and very atmospheric, very perfect for fall, autumn vibes, you know, like drink some apple cider, pick some pumpkins. It's just like very atmospheric, very fun, and I have read this one. I read it with my boyfriend Will right around Halloween time, and it was the perfect time to read it. I loved it. It was so cute and adorable, and honestly, I might consider reading it every year. It's just one of those things that really puts you in the mood for fall, so I just really, really enjoyed it. Okay, so that is it for all the books I got recently. I called it Christmas haul, but it's honestly not. The timing works, so I'm going with it. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please make sure you are subscribed down below so you don't miss any future bookish content from me in the coming year. And if you want to follow me on social media, all my links are in the description box down below, as they always are. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!